I don't really feel like presenting anything new in this video. I just wanted to dive into some ideas that have already been tossed out there from yesterday, from the past 48 hours, and even from the past 2 years. Because when you talk about the Vancouver Canucks, the big conversation about the team right now, if you had asked any Canucks fan who had seen the first 2 games of the regular season, is that they have not been particularly great. And I feel like this has been cemented by a number of things. Firstly, you have the top players maybe not playing or generating offense as top players probably should. Everybody's been talking about Elias Pettersson. In yesterday's game, everybody was talking about the holistic play of the top guys as a whole. Miller, Besser, Petey, not really getting up there on the board. The Canucks' only offensive conversions came from Teddy Bluger and Nils Höglander, for crying out loud. And in a game where Philadelphia, the Flyers of all teams, were able to control the bulk of the ending frames, compiled with the Calgary Flames taking control of the Canucks in periods 2 and 3 of their game, you start to talk about how the Vancouver Canucks are not playing Rick Tocchet hockey. This was brought up by Don Taylor on Twitter after the Canucks and the Flyers game. He says here that the bottom line is the Canucks were outworked at home back-to-back by teams with inferior talent. This is not Tocchet hockey. And just watching the games be played live, you can kind of sense it. Like, sure, the Canucks have their moments, they have their offensive opportunities, they have their offensive control, but when it comes to that dynamism, you know, the pace of play, being able to dictate things the way they want, the Vancouver Canucks had not been doing too much of that in the first 2 games. Now, sure, they started off the season with a ballistic, amazing period going up 4-1, but then they proceeded to lose that game 6-5 in overtime, blowing the 3-goal lead in the process, and having to come back from behind, being down 5-4. The Flyers game saw the Vancouver Canucks have a whole bunch of opportunities in zone time on the power play, but ultimately failed to make anything significantly dangerous happen. So what gives? These other teams are taking advantage of the Canucks and are striking when the iron is hot. They are taking advantage of the Canucks' weaknesses, and it's resulted in 2 overtime or shootout losses for Vancouver thus far. Here's the thing that I also wanted to talk about in regards to this, because it was posted by Sportsnet Stats that this marks the first time in Canucks history that they've begun the season with back-to-back losses while holding a third-period lead in each contest. That stat sucks. Oh hey, it's the first time the Canucks have lost the first 2 games of the year while holding a third-period lead in both of those games. Like, who even thinks of that? The stipulations of that coming together are so unique, but while it is interesting to acknowledge that the Vancouver Canucks have had this bad string to start out their year with 2 back-to-back losses while holding a third-period lead, I think it becomes a lot easier to stomach this and be more rational about this when you acknowledge just how the Vancouver Canucks season's beginnings have gone the past few years. The reason I say that is, if you go over to the Vancouver Canucks season from last year, 2023-2024, if you look at the first 16 games of Vancouver Canucks hockey, guess what? The Canucks had only lost 4 of their first 16 games, and one of those losses was in overtime. They were 12-3-1 to kick off the year, and it has been pointed out by some other Canucks fans that, hey, everybody's overreacting, everybody's all doom and gloom about the team after losing 2 games in OT to start things out, but you gotta remember, they were amazing last year. They had pretty much the best start they have ever had. So would it not be reasonable to assume that because that was the standard set last year, Canucks fans may be a little bit too overly critical when analyzing the team's 0-2 record this year? Maybe because people were expecting a step up from last year and they were amazing last year to start out the season, anything less than 12-3-1 to kick off the season would be seen as a failure. Sometimes you start hot, sometimes you start cold. The Edmonton Oilers were one of the worst teams in the league last year after October. They were so far down, projected making the playoffs and everything. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl weren't scoring points. Like, it was a bad, terrible beginning for the Oilers in 23-24. And guess what? They ended up clawing back to second in the Pacific, they made the finals, and Connor McDavid, the guy who was down there not producing any points to kick off the year, ended off the season with 100 assists. Like, the start of the season isn't that bad, folks. I get it, the Canucks have not been playing well, they have not been playing Rick-Tocchet hockey, but there are worse things they could be going out there and exhibiting. Because if you want to talk about ups and downs, you want to talk about the ebbs and flows, how things are never constant, okay, 2024-2025, the Canucks are off to a pretty rough start at the beginning of the year. The year beforehand, 23-24, they're amazing. Great. What happened 2 years ago, though, in 2022-2023? Well, might I remind you that the 2022-2023 Vancouver Canucks team, under Bruce Boudreau, lost their first 7 games of the year. And it got even worse when you read this tweet from Sportsnet Stats back in that time frame. The Canucks became the first team in NHL history to lose each of their first 3 games of the season while blowing a multi-goal lead in each contest. Remember that? The Canucks losing and losing and losing after having multi-goal leads against the Oilers, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the Washington Capitals. They were doing so well, and then they fell apart, and the next few games they also fell apart, and I'm not using this as an idea to say, oh yeah, look, but they rebounded and they became good and they made the playoffs. No, they didn't in 2022-2023. They finished outside the playoff picture, just barely, but the point is, this kind of progression for a team seems to be pretty normal. The Canucks are really bad in 22-23 at the beginning of the year. They're really great at the beginning of the year, the next season. And now, 1 year later, they're back to being mediocre to mid to maybe even a little bit bad again. While last year was a standards-defining, expectations-setting year for Vancouver, and while this season has failed to live up to that, I still think it's a little bit too early to start tossing in the towel here. Fans are going to overreact. It's human nature to do so. But for now, I just wanted to make a video talking about the Vancouver Canucks and their starts, because when stats like these come up saying, oh yeah, it's the first time that they've ever blown a multi-goal lead twice in the third period to start out the season, like, you know, stats like that get kind of ridiculous and misconstrued by fans into saying, oh yeah, look, they're really that bad. Let's not believe in them anymore. Okay, no, it's not that extreme. It's really not. But it is kind of extreme. So I did want to go out there and make this video just diving into some of these thoughts about the Canucks and their lack of Rick-Tocchet hockey, their poor start so far in the 24-25 campaign. We'll see whether or not they're able to rebound and fix everything up before they play the Tampa Bay Lightning on Tuesday. But for now, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the Canucks versus the Flames and the Canucks versus the Flyers, the Canucks versus 2 F teams, and how you feel about them suiting up and doing their thing, not finding a way to get things done in the proper way in this season so far. Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.